Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name's Denise and today we'll be pressure canning Bolognese sauce. Please keep in mind that pressure canning is not the same as pressure cooking. Pressure canners reach a very high temperature and are able to kill bacteria in food that could cause illness. If you want a more detailed video on the differences between pressure cooking and pressure canning, then leave me a comment. This is the Bolognese sauce we made in a previous video and I pressure canned it on that same day. But I made it in two different videos so you can enjoy them separately. I'll put a card at the top of the screen for that video so you can find it easily. I've retrieved everything I need already. The sanitized jars, the lids, the rings, the canning funnel, the jar lifter, and of course my pressure canner. I put the jars on a towel so they don't get thermal shock from the hot jars sitting on a cool counter, and also protecting them from banging from me. I know me too well. I've also put the required amount of water into my pressure canner and started it heating up to follow the safety rule of hot product, hot jars, and hot canner. So let's get over to the stove. As I mentioned in my previous video, this is my 8-quart stock pot and I anticipate getting 8 quarts of product, or nearly. My pressure canner holds 7 quarts and I made a large batch so I would have enough to can. You certainly don't need to make it in such large quantities like I do. If you enjoy canning though, or are interested in becoming a canner, then you'll quickly learn the benefits of making large batches, so it's worthwhile to drag out your canner. It smells amazing in this kitchen. Doesn't that Bolognese sauce look incredible? I filled each jar to a 1-inch headspace, which is just above the shoulders of the jar. This is to allow room for the product to boil vigorously inside the jar, create a seal, and do all that without having any seepage. Spoiler alert on this video though, I get one of my jars a little too full and wind up with a bit of seepage. It doesn't create a problem for the finished product, it just creates a bit of a mess in the canner and on the outside of the jars. You'll see that later. And when I say it doesn't cause a problem, as long as the jars seal, it doesn't cause a problem. There's something so cathartic about filling these jars. Scoop it up, pour it in, repeat. Scoop it up, pour it in, repeat. Maybe it's just me. Here you can see I got that jar a little bit too full, so I'm scooping some of it out and putting it into a different jar. I should have paid more attention to all of them like that. Then I wouldn't have had any seepage and no cleanup or very little. But that's okay. That's part of canning and it's part of cooking, and I show myself grace. I wound up getting 7 quarts to fill my canner and will refrigerate the partial 1/8 quart for use in the next couple of days. Now I'm wiping the rims of each jar with a paper towel that has been dipped in white vinegar. The vinegar cuts through any oily film from the meat and cleans the rims very well for any sauce that has splashed up while I was filling the jars. This is a necessary step to ensure there is a good seal between the rim of the jar and the rubber ring around the inside of the lid. If you skip this step, you could have some failed seals. After debubbling each jar, I top each one with a new canning lid. I am visually inspecting as I go to ensure I didn't miss any food splatter on the rims. Once the lids are all in place, I finish the jars by putting a band on each one and tightening it to fingertip tight. You don't want to crank down on these bands, you'll only have problems if you do. I tighten them until there is some resistance, and then I go a little bit more. That's what works for me. You'll find what works for you if you're a new canner. If they're too loose, then they may not seal, and if they're too tight, then the lids could buckle while they're canning. Here we are at my pressure canner, and since I've been heating the water, I make sure to open the lid away from me so I don't get a steam burn on my arms and face. As you can see, the water isn't boiling, which is important. You don't want the water to be boiling yet. But it is hot enough to match the temperature of the Bolognese sauce. Now I'm using my jar lifter to put the hot jars in the hot canner. If you're new to canning and have not purchased a jar lifter, you can use a thermal glove here, like you've seen me use in my other videos. Just use caution. I'll put a link to my jar lifter set and canning funnel in the video description for you. I snuggle each jar into the canner so they all fit. This is my stovetop Presto canner. I'll provide a link to it in the video description below in case you're interested in canning. There they are, all my lovelies ready to be pressure canned. Now I put the lid on the canner and twist it to lock the lid. I turn the heat on high and wait for it to start venting. Here you can see a steady stream of steam coming out the vent pipe at the top of the canner. I'm holding my blue splatter guard behind the canner to make it easier to see the steam. At this point, I start a timer for 10 minutes to allow time for the canner to evacuate all the air inside before the canning process can begin. After 10 minutes has elapsed, I put the regulator on the vent pipe and wait for the pressure dial to read 10 pounds of pressure, which is what I need for my altitude. You may need a different reading for your altitude, so check your canner's documentation. Once the canner reaches 10 pounds of pressure, I start a timer for 90 minutes and watch the canner to ensure the dial stays at or above 10 pounds of pressure the entire time. When the 90-minute timer completes, I turn off the heat and leave the canner alone until the pressure dial returns to 0 and the pressure indicator drops. At that point, I can remove the regulator and unlock the lid. Remember to carefully open the canner away from you to avoid getting a bad steam burn. It's very hot inside the canner. I'm unloading the canner here. It's very important to use a jar lifter to prevent being burned. Notice how the sauce is still boiling inside the jar. Pressure canners process at 240 degrees Fahrenheit, which is far above the standard boiling point of 212 degrees. That's why I keep stressing the importance of taking safety precautions. When I remove the jars, you'll notice how the water in the bottom of the canner is not clear anymore. This is because I overfilled at least one of my jars and had some seepage. This is the next day when the jars have cooled completely. I'm tapping on the lids to ensure every seal was successful, and they were. I then removed the bands from each jar. Because there was some seepage, the jars need to be cleaned up a little bit. Now, when I talked about the seals having formed, see, I can pick it up by the lid. So in addition to that little notch at the top being sucked in with the vacuum, that's what happens during the canning process. I can also check it by picking the jar up by the lid. And if the lid stays in place, then it has sealed properly. It was a pleasure spending time with you today. If you liked this video, give it a like and leave me a comment. I enjoyed having you in my kitchen and look forward to seeing you again. Until my next upload, be safe and be well.